So I'm Dapplion core dev at Lodestar, and today we're going to talk about scaling. So yeah, as you know, we are putting a lot of effort in scaling. I think it's the most important thing we have to work on. And today I'm going to talk about proto-Danksharding. What's it about? Why is that important? And is proto-Danksharding really only a meme, or are we doing this for real? Just stay tuned. So yeah, why proto-Danksharding? Why are we putting so much energy in scaling? Why sharding at all? Why rollups? Why is this all important? So the key thought here is that we all want Ethereum to be a maximally useful, with the maximum throughput possible, and secure chain. To do that, we want to have a base as large as possible that can run nodes. So we limit ourselves the requirements to run a node in this fictitious red line. What this means is, if we want to serve the entire population, say people buying coffees, this doesn't scale. We cannot have everyone processing everything. So that's where sharding comes along. An okay trade-off, I'm just picking here an icon, doesn't have any meaning, but we could just keep increasing the requirements of running a node. That would mean that only a tiny majority of well-capitalized individuals will be able to run nodes, and everyone else would have to trust the majority. In case there is a disagreement, you have two options. You can either just drop the security of the chain and follow the majority, or stop and manually resolve. Probably you would just go to crypto Twitter, there will be some huge argument, someone claiming this is right, which is not great, doesn't scale. So what we want is something on that unicorn area where we have high throughput, but still keep reasonable security by having everyone run nodes. So going back to this example, the key intuition here is we want high throughput chains. We want scaling. But what if we automate this step? What if we automate the stop and recovery? And that's where rollups come from. That's the key framework. So optimistic rollups, they automate fraud proofs. You can automate dispute resolution, and then with validity rollups like ZK, there is no dispute resolution because correctness is asserted immediately. So that's fantastic because we have a 1 of n trust assumption, which is quasi-equivalent to mainnet, but we can go crazy with throughput. But there is a catch. If data isn't available, the whole system collapses. And I'm going to explain why, but it's the most important takeaway I want you to get here. For optimistic rollups, if data isn't available, they can steal your funds. Not great. For validity rollups, if data isn't available, you are locked out of the rollup. That's pretty bad. And why does that happen? So for optimistic rollups, the key assumption is that whenever there is an update on the network, you must assume that someone is watching and will submit a fraud proof in case of misbehavior. If there is no knowledge of the transaction input list, no one can submit it, no one can challenge it, and then the security breaks. For validity rollups, if you don't submit, so if the transaction list is not submitted, you know that the current state is correct, but you have no idea what the state is. That means that you cannot create more blocks, you cannot submit new transactions, so you are stuck on the rollup. So key thought here, if no data availability, no rollup, this whole thing collapses. Cool. So who needs to perform this duty, this task of ensuring that data is available? Like a naive thought would be, if we are offloading computation to rollup participants, we can do the same for data, right? Like we can have some specialized actor or something that keeps the data and proves to everyone that the data is there. But no, everyone has to check for data availability. And the thing here is the data availability problem. The point is you cannot prove that not publishing data is a uniquely attributable fault. So in this example, if the publisher is malicious and holds the data, and then someone else raises the alarm about the data, and then the publisher releases the full block, or the publisher is benevolent, and then the policeman raises the alarm falsely, you have no way to tell these two scenarios apart at T3. And this breaks any design that we could build to have like something like fraud proofs for data. So everyone has to check for data. Cool. So what we do today we have data availability in Ethereum. That's what rollups are using. They just take the data and throw it on the block. And we are here at Idea 1. Just everyone downloads everything. It works, it's safe, it doesn't scale. So next step, naive assumption. Cool, okay, let's make everyone does a fraction of the thing. So you do probabilistic sampling, you take all this data and you just check some parts. The problem is that this isn't safe if you do it naively, because even if you withhold like a tiny fraction of the data, it breaks all the assumptions. You have to be sure that 100% of the data was made available in order to guarantee rollup safety. So this is where crypto comes to the rescue. And what we do is we check the data is available, but not the data, but the extended data. That means that now you only have to prove to yourself that 50% of the data is available. If that's true, you can just recover everything later and you are safe. And now if you do like 20 samples, you have, I think it's like 1 in a million probability that the data would be available, and that's secure enough. So where do we put all this data? Just think, rollups, they don't really care about this data in DVM. They just want this data to be available somewhere for a fraction of time. So blocks are really inefficient because we keep them forever. They are available to the EVM. So we need something else, something new that is temporary. So we keep for weeks, not available to the EVM. So you really only pay for bandwidth. And that's where blob space come from. And we have this new thing, the blob data that the Ethereum doesn't care to interpret or what it means. It just like smashed into the block with a commitment so it can be referred. Now, why are we doing all this KZG crazy crypto stuff? The thing is, we are using Merkle trees today in Ethereum, but they do not allow to do this data recovery thing. So, and if you remember, to do scaling safely, we need this erasure, encoding, extending data magic thing. Otherwise, we are unsafe. So we have to use polynomial commitments because they very, very nicely allow you to do this data recovery. And the best that what we have today is KZG. So that's what we are doing. Cool. So the final vision, 2 to 3 years, maybe a bit optimistic. I hope that would be awesome. But we need scalable network data availability sampling and blobs with KZG. Problem, this thing is very hard. This is really a really difficult problem that researchers are working on, but it's not solved yet. And rollups are crying. They want scaling now, or at least something. So we could do the blob thing, like this thing of having some data that it's cheaper because we don't keep it, it's not on the VM. We could do that today with Merkle roots or some other simple commitment scheme. The problem is we would spend like a year developing this and then just throw it away because we need the KCG eventually. So why don't we just do the KCG now? It's technically stupid, like we don't need it. We're just gonna spend a bunch of time building something that we're not gonna use, but we are saving ourselves from having to throw something. And that's exactly what proto-Danksharding is about. We're just doing the blob thing first with expensive crypto because we don't want to have to do it later. Cool. So what proto-Danksharding really asks the network to do is to download an extra bytes per block. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it is a lot. Just keep in mind that everyone has to have this thing, this block, pass blob, before 4 seconds in order for the network to be stable. Since the merge, the slot goes pretty fast. You, at 0 seconds, are expected to produce a block. Then you have to propagate this block through the network. Then your peers get this block, have to validate it, both consensus and execution, and then you set it as head. If you do that later than the 4 second mark, you consider that that block is missed. That's what we call orphan. And then you vote for the previous block. That has all sorts of consequences. It's unstable. It allows for reorgs to happen more easily. And more importantly, if you vote for the wrong thing, you get less rewards. So say that if propagating the block or validating the block happens faster for some actors, like big operators, they will get more rewards, and that will be a centralizing factor because we will de-incentivize solo stakers. And it's even worse now because now we have MEV boost. We introduced that after the merge, and it's already pretty bad. So this little thing here, like producing a blob, that when I did this chart, I thought it's like, I don't know, half a second. Now it's like a full second or even 2, which is bad. So we are already at the break of the 4 seconds. So the key here is how can we safely transmit these blocks over the network in the most efficient way possible? So we can package the things in different strategies. We could just the whole thing together, like block plus blobs. We could partially couple all the blobs together, the blocks separate, or just full decouple. So the thought here on deciding to couple or not, it has 2 different sides. So we have the historical sync, which is not that important for today, and then the real-time gossip, which is the one I was talking about. We want to have that before the 4 seconds. And the initial spec, what we did some months ago when all this started, we just didn't have enough data, so we just went for the simple way. No complexity, couple everything together. We don't have to modify the validator client or add signatures. It was nice, and yeah, some very smart people are doing experiments, which I cannot disclose yet, but it's bad. It's not ideal. It will very likely lead to network degradation. So we went to the mountains in Austria, and this handsome man just said, okay, let's do it. Let's free the blobs. Like, we have to do it. So yeah, sad. They are separate now. And the intuition here is you, like, again, 512 kilobytes, it doesn't sound like a lot, but it is a lot. Let's assume on a solo staker, you don't have a lot of bandwidth, and this bandwidth is shared with Netflix, your TV, Facebook, whatever. Also, the node is doing other stuff. It's handling attestations and other messages. So assume you have 10 megabits only for blobs, and you have to stream 1 megabyte, which is a reasonable target that we will go for in 1 year. That takes a full second. And if you have to do that for 8 peers, it stretches your bandwidth even more thin. So if you couple, you have to send the whole thing, and then when it gets the next peer, then it validates the thing, and then you have to do it again. So the metric of time to total propagation is very bad. But if we can split and have a way that we can send a chunk and then validate this chunk and then forward, it's much more efficient from an outload bandwidth usage. So this is what the chart below. And that's why we are freeing the blobs. So Anton from TechU did some great simulations, and yeah, the results are fantastic. So if with a couple, we shorten like by half. And even for a more realistic scenario where we have like fast nodes and slow nodes, you cannot see it, but this is full of blue, and these people are wrecked. But if with a couple, then they are kind of okay. So tolerable. Also interesting, he found that float publishing is not good. And so when you are in Gossip, in the current protocol, we usually only forward the things to a small subset of peer. But when you publish, we just send to everyone. And that's thought to be better. But it's actually not. And the reasoning here is that if you have a thin bandwidth and you have to spread that message, the first hop, if you broadcast to everyone, is awfully slow. So the exponentiality of networking kicks too late. But if you just send to 8, then you have the exponential kicking in faster, and that's why it's better. So going to today's spec, that's the topics that we're going for. We have one topic in Gossip where we send individual blobs. They are signed. And then for regresp, that's what you use to recover when Gossip fails or either you want to sync. So here in Gossip, I'm using the notation we do for Gossip Sub 1.1 spec. If it says reject, it means that you do not propagate and you penalize the peer. Ignore, you do not penalize, but you don't penalize the peer. So here we send well-formed, timely, and finalized from the known chain blobs. The third point is important. We now check that they have a correct proposer signature. So that means that now we have to change the validator client to sign not only the block, but every single blob individually. that allows to have content integrity and not have to do any KZG verification on every hop, so we speed up propagation. You have to do that eventually, but you do that in the fourth choice. And then the fourth one is that you only propagate one single block, comma, index, tuple for blob. That's spicy, because it means we don't have any slashing condition for blobs. That means that a proposer that is malicious, it could sign conflicting blobs and attempt to split the network, because it would send, say, to the left, blob 1, which is the correct, to the right, blob 2, which is incorrect, and then they two could not come into agreement on what's correct because the blob is missing. However, with the regresp, we can recover. You will not get it from gossip, but when you get the block, you would realize, oh, I'm missing the blob number 2. So you would use the by root to recover, and then you are fine. So that would cause to add latency in the network, but it's thought to be safe, because really it's in the block producer interest to broadcast everything as fast as possible. Otherwise, the block is missed. And in reality, if they want to, they can just completely miss the block today. And the penalty is that they don't have any reward. So for regresp, you can request by root. You use the tuple block root index. You are supposed to use that to recover from these problems in gossip when you're missing blocks as a backup, and then you use the range to sync from like when you are offline. So an interesting point here that I think it's not talked that much is that blobs are only exposed up to the retention window. This is, again, from the very beginning, if you remember, we don't want to keep blobs forever. We only kept them for like 2 weeks, something like that. So if you today stop your node, you go on holiday, and then you turn it back again after 2 weeks, you will not be able to sync. Because you are from behind the retention window, and now you are trying to sync blocks that have blobs, and you don't know if those blobs exist or were not available, and the P2P layer has no mechanism to give that to you. So now you will be forced to use a weak subjectivity checkpoint sync to kind of tell the node, I have manually go somewhere to Twitter or Discord and checked that data is available, so trust me, it is. Yeah, you can jump into the green area and continue doing your thing. And that also applies in case of reorgs. If we have a deep reorg that goes beyond the retention window, your node will get stuck, but this is very unlikely. And also, this is not really a problem today, because the weak subjectivity window is kind of on the range of this, but something we want to do in the future maybe is like shorten this window to relieve the nodes of having to store so much data if we want to go like beyond 1 meg of blobs, 2 megs of blobs. And this can be a problem. So yeah, it's been an awesome progress. We have come from very far. All these things started early last year. Now we are on DevNet 5, where we are actually implementing all of these I'm talking today, the Free the Blobs initiative. And yeah, the spec is easy, but now we are shifting all the complexity to the implementation. So it will be about just fixing all the details, but I think it's worth it, because ultimately this is going to remove a potential centralization factor on the network by putting everyone on the level field. And yeah, thank you so much for your attention. Oh,
great.
And
okay, so thanks for Dapplion give us an amazing talk about Danksharding. So anyone here want to have some questions, then I think we can accept 2 or 3 questions, right?
Sure.
Okay, maybe I will post first one. So,
sure. Yeah, and last thing, so I'm the lead at Lodestar. We are a consensus client. We are the last one to join the Launchpad, so if you care about client diversity, please run Lodestar, join the Discord, we will help you, it's awesome, and yeah, thank you so much.
So since Danksharding is a bunch of research, so the learning curve is pretty high, so do you have any suggest reading or a video that you can recommend to our audience?
Yeah, with any topic in Ethereum, if you want to learn about it, just put Vitalik space, the name of the topic, and that's usually the best material. Yeah, we just do that. He has great presentations on YouTube and everywhere, very well explained. And yeah, I mean, just take it with time. It's complex, but it's not. Yeah, it's not that bad.
And also, since the EIP 4844 is coming, so in your perspective, so what is the progress if or how long do we achieve to the Danksharding in the future?
So I would say now we have the two splits, the consensus layer and execution layer. The consensus layer, it's, I would say, quasi-complete. We are now finishing the P2P layer, like what I'm talking today about, the free develops. The execution folks still have a bit of catch-up, so I'm optimistic end of year, hopefully, could be a nice target.
Anyone has a question?
Hi, Dapplion. So as a staker, if the Danksharding upgrade happened, like what should I change about my hardware or like what should I pay attention to?
Yeah, so with Danksharding, you have to expect that you would be needing more bandwidth and a constant amount of disk extra. The disk doesn't have to be SSD. It could be a hard drive. And I think it would be about 200 gigabytes extra that you would need. And then bandwidth, we'll see. But yeah, maybe like between 1 and 5 megabits when we're starting. But besides that, should be good.
Thank you very much.
Who else want to ask a question?
So just for the understanding, is these changes, are they only going to be consensus layer relevant, like adding these blobs there, or is it also going to be an update on the execution layer?
Yeah, so the EIP itself affects all the layers and literally everything. But the blobs itself, they would not be exposed to execution. The execution layer only gets the hash of the commitment, and that's all they need.
Any questions? All right. Okay. Thanks for the amazing talk. Thank you.
Thank you.